Okay, so here we are. We're going to show everybody how to feed my mom her tube feeds. First thing you should need to do before you start even putting anything in is to draw back on her tube and make sure there's not a lot in there. Because it's really important that that we're not putting food in her when she's completely full. So the way we do that, we start with the tube, and the first thing you do, don't unclamp it yet, okay? And so there's a clamp here, right? And there's a tube over here, and this is where the food goes in. This red port is the balloon port, and this is a balloon on the inside that kind of holds the tube in place and keeps it from just falling out on its own. Don't worry about that for now. Just leave it alone, all right? And that should only be deflated or inflated by the physician when they want to replace the tube or anything like that. So what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is pull the plug out, right? And by pulling the plug out, you'll notice that nothing comes back because the clamp is still in place. And now that we have the clamp in place, we can push this in, right? Now that we have everything closed off so it doesn't make a mess, we can now unclamp, right, and draw back on the syringe. Now, don't go crazy at this. Just kind of draw back gently, right? You'll see there's always seems to be a little bit of air, right? Because mommy tends to swallow air every once in a while, and there's a little bit of fluid in there, but there's not a whole lot of fluid. So that's good. So we'll draw out some of the extra air in there, make some space for our food so that it's not by itself. But the important thing is that there's not a whole bunch of fluid in there from the last meal that's not proceeding any further, right? It looks like we have about, we almost filled up the syringe with air. So if you fill up the syringe with air and you feel like there's a little more air to get out, or if you fill it up with food and you feel like there's a little more, you can reclamp it, all right? You'll undo this here, right? Try not to drip any of that extra fluid out. Redo this, so that we have a new fresh load of the syringe, and see if we can draw out a little bit more. And eventually you will come down to the point where there's not too much more to draw out, like that. And you notice that when I pull back over here on the top of the syringe and I let go, it kind of bounces back, and that kind of tells you that you're pretty much done drawing back, and there's no reason to draw back some more. So now that we've done that, you might think, well, let's just pull the syringe out and put food in. But you notice, like I said, you're under negative pressure. You're not able to pull back on it. So what you have to do is you can reclamp it, pull the syringe off, right? And now, right, what you do is you can remove the entire syringe, right? Like that, right? And so it's completely off. Now that you have this completely off, you can put this back on again. And notice now that you have basically an empty tube, right? Free to open the air, and theoretically, if the stomach was under a lot of pressure and there was a lot of stuff in there, if I release this clamp, if it was under a lot of pressure, it would jump out. But I know it's not, because I've just drawn back on it. That's another reason to draw back on it before you just start doing this, because otherwise it could explode like a volcano in your face. So I can remove the clamp, and now the tube is all the way open down to the inside. And then we take the mixture of food, which we mixed up earlier today, and we basically start slowly pouring it in. And this is what we call gravity feeding, right? It's probably the safest way to do it too. Because what happens is you're just using the weight of the food as gravity to kind of go down the tube. And you'll notice the food will kind of go down on its own. There's no magical science to it. Sure, if you hold it a little bit higher, it might go down a little bit faster. It's all a matter of simple physics. One thing to check, though, if it's not going down, is to make sure there's no kink here at the tape. So sometimes it gets kinked like this, and you're wondering, wonder why it's not going down. Well, it's because it's kinked. So if you unkink it, it'll go down again, right? Like that. The other thing that can also prevent the fluid from going down is if you didn't mix the powder very well, and the powder is still kind of thick. And you really want to try to avoid that. Because if the powder is thick, or if the medication you put in there is powdery and it hasn't really mixed into the water, what will happen is the powder and or the medication will clog the tube. And if that happens, it's kind of a pain in the butt, because then you have to somehow flush the tube out or draw back on it. One trick that has often worked in the past is to put something like Coca-Cola in the tube. And for some reason, the bubbles in the Coca-Cola kind of mix things up a little bit and jiggle things around, and then magically you can flush through again. All right? So as you can see, the liquid is flowing in very easily there. And we're in very good shape because we've mixed it very well. So we will put one more load. Now, try not to do too much at one time. Let it go slowly. No reason to rush it, and just kind of keep up with it here. Like that. Alright. Usually we're feeding mommy about 250 cc's to 300. I think we're going to be switching now instead of the powdered form to a canned form pretty soon. And we'll probably use up the powder that we have and then switch to cans, in which case it will be simpler because you won't have to mix the concentrations up. This tube is not only for tube feeds as well. It's not only for tube feeds. You can put anything you want that you would normally eat through the tube as long as it's in a liquid form that can be pushed through. That means that, if Daddy or someone else is having a blended drink of, vegetables and green blended food using the Vitamix that we have, you can go ahead and put that down here too. And that would be great for her digestion, as it would have a lot of fiber. And, any juices you want, you can put down the tube as well. And so, the thing is, of course, it does bypass mommy's ability to taste the juice. And so, she wouldn't get to taste the food. That would be very tasty, I'm sure. Now, the thing is, you should know that since this is milk and it's emulsified and it can kind of solidify up, it is really important that anytime you put anything through the tube, that the last thing you flush through is a little bit of water. And so you'll notice that I always have a little bit of water next to me, right? And you want to wait until all the milk, you don't want to put the milk in, put it in right now, because then it just kind of mixes in with the milk, with the fluid. And you only want to put about 20 to 30 cc's of this in here. So I put about 30 cc's, and I let it drain down. And as it goes down, just as it goes to the very end, I clamp it off as it all goes through. Right? And by clamping it off, that means that the tube now has a column of water inside the tube. And that prevents it from getting clogged once it's clamped. And that's it. All you have to do is take this off, plug the tube, and Mommy has just finished her meal in about 10 minutes. And has plenty of calories. Now, do not ever let using tube feeds to feed her be an excuse to not let Mommy taste the wonderful food you happen to be eating at the same time. It is okay for Mommy to eat as well regular food. Thank you.